Young and Restless early spoilers December 8th to 12th. Nikki's jaw-dropping shock and Diane's ruthless dirty tricks. As always on early edition day, we talk about what's coming the rest of this week. Then we'll dive into next week. Young and the Restless, Nick and Sharon horrified. On Wednesday, December 3rd, we've got Sharon Newman, Sharon Case, and Nick Newman, Joshua Morrow very upset. They found terrible things at the warehouse. Maybe some drugged-out people, dead bodies because of the whole fentanyl ring that Mitch Bacall aka Matt Clark, Roger Howarth, is running. But they did not find their son Noah Newman, Lucas Adams. So, Detective Annie Stewart, Catherine Kresge, and Detective Burrow, Matt Cohen, think that Mitch/Matt lied about holding Noah there, and they also think that Matt might be panicking over them poking into his fentanyl business. Of course, they're undercover, and they're hoping he doesn't know she's undercover and Detective Burrow is undercover as a dirty cop, but they are both definitely working this. And I just wonder if Burrow is a double agent because of some of the things he's doing. The two detectives tell Nick and Sharon that Matt doesn't know the cops are onto his drug ring, that he's just upset about other things. Young and the Restless, Matt toying with Nick and Sharon. So, Nick bribes this homeless guy who looks at a photo of Noah and says that he saw him looking all strung out and high with some woman. But this is a red herring. Later, Detective Burrow reports to Mitch/Matt that Nick and Sharon think that Matt sent them on a wild goose chase. He wants them to think Noah is dead, so that Nick and Sharon are suffering. So, Detective Burrow confirms that the homeless guy that they planted there did indeed lie to Nick. And then Detective Burrow wants to know why Mitch/Matt hates Nick and Sharon so much. And Matt says that Nick and Sharon bother him, and they're arrogant. On top of that, he was nice to Noah, was helping him with business, and he repaid him by screwing his wife. Young and the Restless, Victor comes face to face with Matt Clark. Victor Newman, Eric Braden, walks in on their conversation. The mustache just casually strolls into the shadow room in Los Angeles and calls him Matt, and he denies that's his name and said, "It's Mitch." Victor says, Matt should have stayed dead, and he continues pretending not to know Victor. So, Victor wants to know from Matt where Noah is, and he again says his name's Mitch, and says maybe Noah is with Sienna getting high and is talking about her being a druggie. Victor is vowing to destroy Matt unless he cuts a deal with him, and that didn't go that well. Then Victor shows up at Nick and Sharon's hotel and says he offered Matt a big old payoff to hand Noah over, and he refused. So Victor says that Mitch/Matt also told him that Sienna is cheating with Noah, and that Sienna is a druggie who will try and get Noah hooked. But Nick and Sharon don't think she is. They say that Sienna doesn't seem like a druggie. She seems clean. No signs of drug use. They're also wondering if the homeless guy was a fake. And Victor tells them he has another idea how to save Noah. Young and the Restless, Noah and Sienna's escape thwarted. Sienna is cuddling with Noah to keep warm. And they talk about cheating on her husband and his partner Allie Nguyen, Kelsey Wong. And Noah knows he needs to call and break it off with Allie, but he doesn't want to hurt her. But he wants to be with Sienna. And Noah tells her that Detective Burrow is a dirty cop because he's the one who took him out of the shadow room, and then he woke up in that room there with her. Sienna is completely horrified because she had no idea all these years her husband was really Matt, and that he's this monster. But Sienna says that she chooses Noah and has no regrets. He tries to use Sienna's lightning bolt pendant to work on the door hinges, and he actually gets them undone. Opens the door. Noah and Sienna think, okay, we're out of here. But Detective Burrow and Mitch/Matt are right there when he opens the door. YandR spoilers, Victor's power play and Jabot's counterattack. Thursday, December 4th, we've got Victor pulling a slick move and outmaneuvering Mitch/Matt. And I suspect this may give Sharon and Nick a better shot at finding Noah and Sienna. Matt might have actually moved them after catching them escaping. And Mitch/Matt is forcing Noah's hand about something. He may make some sort of crazy demand, break up with Sienna, leave town, or he hurts her. We'll see. Nikki learns a secret from Jack Abbott, Peter Bergman, on Friday the 5th. And I'm just wondering if Jack's going to share info with Nikki, either fake info, hoping she'll tell Victor, or Jack might tell Nikki that, don't tell anybody, but we're pursuing criminal charges on Victor because of him using this AI and asks her not to warn Victor. Knowing she obviously would. Maybe they're going to try and put a scare in her because what he is doing is absolutely illegal. It's cybercrime. Young and the Restless, Diane and Kyle scheme together. Kyle Abbott, Michael Mealer, and Diane are working really hard to dig up some dirt on Victor, something they can use to thwart him. Diane really wants to see Victor prosecuted for using this illegal AI, But the problem is right now he's only used it at Arabesque, not on Abbotcombe or Jabot. But still, they're going to dig. Audra Charles, Zuleika Silver, faces Claire Grace Newman's Haley Aaron, wrath on Friday on Young and the Restless. Now that Holden Novak, Nathan Owens, told Claire that Audra robbed that random guy, who's not so random really out of big money, Claire may threaten Audra and tell her dirty secrets are coming out. Claire left Billy Abbott, Jason Thompson, a message, so maybe they've talked off-screen and she gave her the info. But if Claire warns her it's about to come out, Audra's going to run to Holden and tell him, "Look, you idiot, we're both about to be, public enemy number one, unless you shut this down." Next week on Young and the Restless, an anniversary, a villain's return and lingering threats. The following week, December 8th through the 12th, on Tuesday, December 9th, we have a special standalone episode celebrating Michael Baldwin, Christian Jules LeBlanc, and Lauren Fenmore's Tracy Bregman 20th wedding anniversary. Get ready for tons of flashbacks from back in the day. Sienna and Noah are soon free of Mitch/Matt and head home to Genoa City. Looks like Victor being out in Los Angeles is the tipping point that works it out. Matt may, pretend like he lost and let them go. But he is going to creep up on Genoa City and take everybody unaware, as we know that from an interview with Roger Howarth about the plans for the villain he's playing. Now he is far from done. He wants Noah to pay for sleeping with Sienna and Nick and Sharon just to pay in general because he hates them. Noah and Sienna are in Genoa City, soon hoping to put the LA nightmare behind them and enjoy a holiday together. Obviously, Noah owes Allie a call. Jack may not like that, but he has settled on Sienna. YandR spoilers. Matt stirs up trouble in Genoa City. So, I wonder also if Matt might try and expand his fentanyl operation to Genoa City, especially if the LA cops are on to him. I'm also wondering if hunky Detective Burrow will get a transfer to the GCPD, because we got no cops in town, and he is really hot. I like that actor a whole bunch. The actor is Matt Cohen. He played Griffin Monroe over on General Hospital, if you happen to see that. Genoa City was never quiet for long. But even by its ruthless standards, the coming days promised to shatter alliances, expose buried secrets, and leave some of its most powerful players reeling. At the center of the storm stood Nikki Newman, blindsided by a revelation she never saw coming, while Diane Jenkins descended deeper into the shadows, proving once again that she would stop at nothing to protect her place in the Abbott dynasty. Nikki's world tilts off its axis. Nikki Newman had survived decades of betrayals, heartbreaks, and power plays. She had endured Victor's manipulations, weathered family wars, and clawed her way back from personal demons that once threatened to consume her entirely. She believed, foolishly as it turned out, that nothing could shock her anymore. She was wrong. The revelation came quietly at first, disguised as a harmless conversation. But when the truth finally surfaced, it landed like a thunderclap. Nikki discovered that someone she trusted, someone she had defended fiercely, had been working against her behind the scenes, quietly undermining her influence and manipulating Victor's loyalty. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was the motive. This wasn't business. This wasn't strategy. This was personal. As the truth settled in, Nikki's hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. Her mind raced through every recent argument with Victor, every moment she felt dismissed or sidelined. Suddenly it all made sense. Someone had been whispering in his ear, twisting facts, rewriting history, and turning husband against wife in the most insidious way possible. When Nikki confronted Victor, the tension was explosive. Years of unresolved resentment poured out in sharp, cutting words. Victor, ever the master of control, attempted to deflect. But Nikki was no longer willing to play the role of the forgiving partner. "You didn't just doubt me," she snapped. "You replaced me." The accusation hit harder than Victor expected. And for the first time in a long while, the great Victor Newman found himself on shaky ground, forced to reckon with the consequences of underestimating the woman who had stood by him through everything. A reckoning is coming. Nikki's shock quickly transformed into resolve. She wasn't going to retreat. She wasn't going to drown her pain in old habits. Instead, she made a silent vow. Whoever crossed her would pay. And Nikki Newman never forgets. She began quietly reconnecting with allies, reasserting her influence, and watching carefully as fault lines formed within the Newman family. The question wasn't whether she would strike back, it was when. Meanwhile, across town, Diane Jenkins crosses a dangerous line. If Nikki was fighting betrayal with dignity and fire, Diane Jenkins was fighting fear with deception. Diane knew the walls were closing in. Her carefully constructed image, the devoted wife, the reformed schemer, was starting to crack. Kyle's trust wavered. Jack's confidence wasn't as unshakable as she pretended. And worst of all, someone had discovered evidence that could destroy everything she had worked so hard to reclaim. Panic set in. But Diane didn't panic like other people. She plotted. Her first dirty trick was subtle. A falsified paper trail designed to implicate someone else in her secret dealings. She planted just enough truth to make the lie believable, ensuring suspicion would fall anywhere but on her. Then she turned her attention to emotional manipulation, playing on Jack's protective instincts and Kyle's lingering guilt over their fractured past. "I've changed," she insisted, tears shimmering just enough to seem real. "Why won't anyone believe me?" But behind closed doors, Diane was ruthless. She intercepted messages, deleted emails, twisted conversations. And when that wasn't enough, she escalated, deliberately pushing an old rival into making a mistake that would distract everyone from her own crimes. It worked. For now. Jack and Kyle in the crossfire. Jack Abbott sensed something was wrong, even if he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Diane's desperation was becoming harder to ignore. Her smiles were too tight, her reassurances too rehearsed. And when Jack questioned her directly, the flash of anger in her eyes vanished just a second too late. Kyle, meanwhile, found himself torn between loyalty and logic. He wanted to believe his mother had changed. He needed that to be true. But every time he dug a little deeper, he found inconsistencies that gnawed at him. And Diane knew it. That's why her next move targeted Kyle directly, feeding him just enough selective truth to keep him conflicted and off balance. If Kyle started asking the wrong questions, everything could unravel. A collision course. As Nikki's fury simmered and Diane's schemes intensified, Genoa City braced for impact. The two women, each powerful in her own way, were on a collision course that threatened to redraw the city's alliances. Nikki was done being underestimated. Diane was done pretending to play fair. The fallout would be brutal. Secrets would explode. Marriages would fracture. And by the time the dust settled, no one would escape unscathed. Not the Newmans, not the Abbotts, and certainly not the woman foolish enough to believe she could manipulate them all without consequences. Because in Genoa City, shocks never come alone. And revenge is always best served through the coffee house had nothing to do with the winter air outside. Sharon felt it first, a sudden tightening in her chest, the kind that came when her instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. She looked up from her mug just as Nick stepped inside, his expression already dark, his jaw clenched as if he were holding back words he didn't yet know how to say. "Nick?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed the room in long strides and sat across from her, sliding his phone onto the table between them. The screen was frozen on a grainy image, surveillance footage, time-stamped just after midnight. Sharon's breath caught. "What am I looking at?" Nick's voice was low, strained. "I was hoping you'd tell me I'm wrong." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing as the image came into focus. A familiar figure stood outside the old ranch gate, hood pulled low, posture unmistakable. The way the shoulders sloped. The slight limp. "Oh my God," Sharon whispered. The face was partially obscured, but there was no mistaking who it was. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's not possible." Nick let out a bitter laugh. "That's what I said." The person in the footage reached into their coat and pulled something out, metallic, glinting under the security light. Sharon's heart slammed painfully as the object became clear. A gun. The world seemed to tilt. Sharon pressed her palm to the table, fighting a wave of nausea. Why would he be there? Why would he have that? Nick scrubbed a hand over his face. "Because someone's been lying to us. For a long time." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Sharon's mind raced through every conversation, every reassuring word, every promise that things were finally calm. "We just started to feel safe again," she murmured. "Faith is finally sleeping through the night." Noah stopped looking over his shoulder. Nick's eyes flickered with pain at the mention of their kids. "That's what scares me the most." Sharon looked up sharply. "You think they're in danger?" "I think," Nick said carefully, "that if this gets out, if Victor finds out—" "Victor already knows," Sharon interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nick froze. "What?" She swallowed hard. "He came by Crimson Lights yesterday. Asked me questions. About old grudges. About whether I thought some people ever truly change." Nick pushed back from the table, anger flaring. "So he's circling. Like always." "This isn't about Victor being Victor," Sharon snapped, surprising even herself. "This is about the fact that someone we trusted is capable of something unforgivable." Nick stared at the image again, his voice breaking. I defended him. I told my family he deserved another chance. So did I, Sharon said, tears welling. I looked our children in the eye and told them the past was over. The door to the coffee house opened, the bell chiming too cheerfully for the moment they were living in. Sharon flinched instinctively, her nerves stretched raw. When she realized it was only a stranger, she let out a shaky breath. Nick noticed. His expression softened. Hey, he said quietly. We'll figure this out. Sharon shook her head. That's what we always say. And every time Genoa City proves us wrong. Her phone buzzed. Once. Twice. She didn't want to look. Nick did it for her, his face draining of color. It's from Faith. Sharon grabbed the phone, her fingers trembling as she read the text. Mom, Dad's acting weird. He keeps asking where you are. Should I be worried? The horror settled in fully then, cold, paralyzing. Nick, Sharon whispered. He's at the house. Nick was already on his feet. We're going. Now. They didn't speak during the drive. There were no words that could ease the terror clawing at their chests. Every red light felt like a personal betrayal. Sharon's thoughts spiraled, memories colliding with fear, love tangling painfully with regret. By the time they pulled up to the house, the porch light was on. The front door was open. Stay behind me, Nick said firmly, stepping out of the car. Inside, the living room was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Sharon's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure it could be heard throughout the house. Faith! Nick called out. Noah! Footsteps sounded from the hallway. Then he appeared. Unarmed now. Calm. Almost gentle. Hey, he said, as if this were just another family visit. I was hoping you'd come. Sharon stared at him, tears spilling freely. What were you thinking? His gaze flickered, just for a moment, with something dangerous. I was thinking about how far things have gone, and how far they might still go. Nick stepped forward, rage barely contained. You brought a gun to my family's home. I didn't use it, he replied quietly. That doesn't make it better. Sharon cried. It makes it worse. The weight of the truth crashed down on all of them then. There was no denying it anymore. No rationalizing. No pretending the past was buried. Nick's voice was iron hard. You need to leave. Now. And if you ever come near my kids again. You'll destroy me? The man interrupted softly. You already look horrified enough. And he was right. Nick and Sharon stood there, united in shock and heartbreak, staring at someone they once believed in. Someone who had just shattered their fragile sense of safety. As he turned and walked out, the door closing with a final, echoing click, Sharon collapsed into Nick's arms. We can't protect them from everything, she sobbed. Nick held her tightly, his own eyes burning. But we'll protect them from this. No matter what it costs. Outside, the wind howled through Genoa City, carrying secrets, consequences, and the unmistakable promise that this nightmare was far from over Genoa City, turning familiar streets into something deceptively peaceful. Inside Crimson Lights, however, the calm was an illusion. One Nick Newman felt tightening around his chest as he stared across the cafe at Sharon Rosales. Their coffee sat untouched, steam curling upward like unanswered questions. You feel it too, don't you? Sharon said quietly, her fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. Something's wrong. Really wrong. Nick nodded. He'd learned long ago not to dismiss Sharon's instincts. Too much history. Too many times when her quiet certainty turned out to be terrifyingly right. Ever since Matt came back into town, Nick said, lowering his voice, it's like he's been circling us. Matt. Even his name felt like a challenge. Matt Miller had returned to Genoa City with a charming smile, a polished resume, and just enough mystery to make people curious instead of cautious. He claimed he was back for business, some vague venture capital deal tied loosely to Newman Enterprises. But Nick wasn't buying it. Not after the cryptic messages. Not after the way Matt always seemed to appear, just as Nick or Sharon were starting to feel safe. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the cafe door opened. A blast of cold air rushed in, followed by Matt himself, impeccably dressed and completely at ease. His eyes flicked immediately to Nick and Sharon, and a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. Well, if it isn't Genoa City's favorite almost couple, Matt said, strolling over without an invitation. Mind if I join you? Nick's jaw tightened. Actually, we do. Matt chuckled as he pulled out a chair anyway. Still so territorial, Nick. Some things never change. Sharon's gaze never left Matt's face. What do you want? Matt leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. Just checking in. Making sure my presence hasn't unsettled you. You're enjoying this, Nick snapped. Am I? Matt's eyes gleamed. Or are you just uncomfortable because I know things? The words hung heavy between them. Sharon stood abruptly. We're leaving. Of course, Matt said smoothly. But before you go, Sharon, you might want to check your voicemail. I left you something nostalgic. Nick shot to his feet. Don't you dare drag her past into this. Matt rose too, standing close enough for Nick to feel the challenge radiating off him. The past has a funny way of resurfacing, especially when people pretend they've moved on. Later that night, Sharon sat alone in her living room, her heart pounding as she replayed the voicemail Matt had referenced. His voice was calm, almost gentle, as he described a night she hadn't spoken about in years, a moment of weakness, a choice she'd buried deep. I'm not threatening you, Matt's voice concluded. I'm just reminding you that secrets don't stay buried forever. The knock at her door came seconds after the message ended. Nick. He didn't wait for an invitation, stepping inside with urgency etched across his face. He's messing with you, isn't he? Sharon nodded, tears welling despite her efforts to stay composed. He knows things, Nick. Things I never told anyone. Nick's anger flared, not at Sharon, but at Matt. Then we stop him. Together. What they didn't know was that Matt was already several steps ahead. The next morning, Nick was summoned to Newman Enterprises under the guise of an emergency meeting. Instead, he found Victor Newman standing by the window, arms crossed, with Matt casually seated at the conference table. Care to explain why this man claims you're obstructing a business deal worth millions? Victor demanded. Nick spun toward Matt. You set me up. Matt feigned innocence. I simply presented the facts. Your personal vendetta against me is clouding your judgment. Victor's eyes narrowed. Nick, is that true? For the first time, Nick felt unsteady. Matt had orchestrated this perfectly, planting doubt, turning allies into skeptics. And Victor Newman did not tolerate weakness. Across town, Sharon faced her own ambush. Phyllis cornered her at Society, smirking as she slid a folder across the table. Care to explain why Matt thinks you're hiding something scandalous? Sharon's blood ran cold. Where did you get that? From Matt, Phyllis replied lightly. He said honesty was important. By the end of the day, Nick and Sharon regrouped at the Newman Ranch, both shaken, both furious. He's playing us, Sharon said, pacing. Dividing us. Making us doubt ourselves. Nick stopped her, gripping her hands. Then we don't let him. We tell the truth. Whatever it is, we face it. Before Sharon could respond, the door creaked open. Matt stood there, uninvited as always. Touching, he said softly. Truly. But you're already too late. Nick stepped forward, fists clenched. Get out. Matt's smile widened. Not yet. I wanted you to know. This isn't about money or power. It's about control. Watching the two of you unravel, that's the real prize. Sharon squared her shoulders. You underestimate us. Matt's eyes flickered just briefly. Do I? As he turned and walked out into the night, Nick and Sharon exchanged a look, fear mixed with resolve. Matt had drawn first blood, but the game was far. Had stared down presidents, criminals, and corporate titans, but as the doors of Newman Enterprises' executive elevator slid open, a rare flicker of caution crossed his eyes. The name Matt Clark had resurfaced like a ghost from a chapter Victor believed permanently sealed, and ghosts had a way of demanding payment. Matt stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands casually tucked into his pockets, gazing out over Genoa City as if he already owned it. He didn't turn when Victor stepped off the elevator. He didn't have to. I was wondering how long it would take, Matt said smoothly. You always did hate being caught off guard. Victor's jaw tightened. You have some nerve setting foot in my building. Matt turned then, a half-smile playing on his lips, one that held familiarity, resentment, and something far more dangerous, confidence. This building? Victor, I've been setting foot in your world for weeks. You just didn't see me. Victor closed the distance between them, his presence commanding, his voice sharp. People who sneak around my family don't last long. Matt chuckled. Funny. That's exactly what you said years ago, right before you destroyed my life. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a split second, Victor saw not the man standing before him, but the past, deals brokered in shadows, a rival crushed without mercy, a promise broken because it was convenient. Victor Newman had survived by never looking back. Matt Clark was proof that some mistakes refused to stay buried. Why are you here? Victor demanded. Money? Revenge? Or are you foolish enough to think you can take me down? Matt's smile faded. I'm here because your empire is built on secrets, Victor. And I know one that could shatter everything. Victor scoffed. I've survived worse threats than you. Not this one, Matt replied calmly. Because this one doesn't just hurt you. It destroys Nick. Sharon. Even Nikki. Victor's eyes narrowed, fury flashing. You leave my family out of this. That's rich, Matt shot back. You didn't leave mine out of it when you ruined me. The tension between them was combustible, years of unresolved hatred crackling beneath every word. Matt stepped closer, lowering his voice. You stole a deal from me once. You made sure I took the fall. You let me believe I was nothing. And now, I'm back to collect. Victor straightened, the familiar steel returning to his spine. You should have stayed gone. Couldn't, Matt said. Not when Nick Newman started asking questions. Not when Sharon's past started colliding with mine. Victor froze. What did you say? Matt's eyes gleamed. You see, Victor, Nick and Sharon are tangled up in something they don't understand yet. And when the truth comes out, they'll realize you've been lying to them for years. Silence followed. The kind that signaled a storm about to break. You think I won't stop you? Victor said quietly. Oh, I know you'll try, Matt replied. But this time you don't control the board. I do. Victor turned away, pacing as his mind calculated threats and counterattacks at lightning speed. If you believe intimidation will work, you're mistaken. I'm not intimidating you, Matt said. I'm warning you. Walk away or I expose everything. Victor turned back sharply. You underestimate me. Matt leaned in, unflinching. And you underestimate how much I've lost, and how little I have left to fear. Just then Victor's phone buzzed. A message from Nikki. We need to talk. Now. Victor knew that tone. Something was already unraveling. When he looked up, Matt was heading toward the elevator. This isn't over, Victor warned. Matt paused, glancing over his shoulder. No, Victor. It's just beginning. The doors closed, leaving Victor alone with the city skyline, and the creeping realization that Matt Clark wasn't bluffing. Later that evening, Victor stood in the Newman living room, the weight of the confrontation pressing heavily on him. Nikki noticed immediately. What's wrong? She asked. Victor hesitated, something he rarely did. An old enemy has returned. Nikki stiffened. How dangerous? Victor met her gaze. Dangerous enough to threaten our children. Across town, Matt Clark sat in his hotel room, staring at a file labeled Newman. Inside were documents, photos, and one explosive truth that could bring Victor Newman to his knees. He wasn't sure yet how he'd use it, but he knew one thing. Victor Newman would finally face consequences. As Genoa City settled into uneasy quiet, two powerful men prepared for war. One defending an empire, the other determined to burn it down. And caught in the crossfire? Nick. Sharon. Nikki. Because when Victor Newman comes face to face with the past, no one escapes unscathed.